Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's nothing like being locked out of your own meeting. So, all right. So yesterday it took a little bit to get the wheels moving for the group in terms of this Ask Me Anything. And then it became a very productive conversation that ended up spilling 10 minutes over. So look, the whole point of these sessions that we built in here is real estate, unlike many people think, sitting in corporate offices or bureaucratic buildings, is a job done with people on the ground, in neighborhoods, on the streets. So I would say clouds and the dirt. So as you guys are in the field, the whole point of these sessions, it's like one-on-one coaching as part of your group, right? So what questions do you have about buyers, commissions, agreements, needs, wants, dreams, desires, concerns, my favorite hallucinations? Like, what do you got going on that you need help with? Right. And so when you're asking these questions, so we can get through as many of them as possible, make them clear, concise, direct, and to the point. And it's good practice for being a salesperson. All right. Who wants to go first? And don't all rush at once, please. Chad.
I will.
Chirag.
Good morning, it's Lisa. How are you?
Lisa, go ahead.
Good. Look at that, 2 at once. I'm excited. All right, Lisa, then Mike. Go ahead, Lisa, shoot.
Okay, great. So I had an open house this past Sunday. A lot of buyers came through, 20 parties all in all, and 18 of them had agent representation. They came on their own, but when it came to sign in and after I'd given them all of the spiel about the property, they, oh, well, I'm working with an agent. So can you please provide the agent's name on my sign-in sheet? Going forward, are we supposed to be like bouncers at the door at an open house? If somebody comes in, should they have a from the flip side, from when we're representing the seller? So I'm attending a listing that is on our team, so it's our listing, but I'm obviously looking for more buyers. So at what point do I do it as soon as you walk in the door? Do you have an agent?
I don't think it necessarily has to change, right? So I would just politely ask them, the homeowner would like to know who is entering their home, right? So you can ask your client first, right? Because you always do, would you like to require a sign-in sheet of all the people that are here, right? If they don't care, then you could put one out for your own benefit. And if they choose to fill it out, they do. And if they don't, they don't, right? And if the owner, most people, when you phrase it that way, yeah, I would like to know who's in my house. Great. You're going to say, if you'd like to come in and tour the home, the owner has requested that each person sign in. Right. And that's it. And then it just says, do you have an agent? Yes or no?
So Chirag, I apologize because I wasn't very clear with my question then, which is what you said at the beginning. We always have a sign-in sheet. My point is with the buyer representation agreement that's taking place in July. At what
I don't
point?
think that if they want to look at the house on their own, they could walk around. You're just giving them basic information. I don't see any reason why that should change anything.
Well, doesn't it take away from the fact that if we hosting open houses in order to get buyer leads, like, shouldn't it be more productive for us to ask that first? Otherwise, I'm quite honestly not wasting my time, but I certainly would give more attention to somebody who's going to, at the end of the day, earn me a commission.
Listen, in the end of the day, you can ask anyone anything you want, right? And you're just going to say, it's very important. You could just nicely say to us, we want to understand if you're looking on your own and if you're represented by somebody, right? So if you are represented and you're happy with who you're working with, we want to respect that professional boundary. And you just say it like that. We're a profession of colleagues. So if you're represented by somebody, just please let me know and just put their name down. So if I have any follow-up questions or want to get feedback about anything, I'll contact your agent. Right. So hold on. Jody dropped something in here. They need a signed buyer's agreement before touring a house with a buyer's agent. You're a free person. My son likes to look at open houses. I don't need an agent or anything to go around and look at houses. I can talk to the people in the house. Like, this is where this whole thing has just created paranoia and just unnecessary problems for people. I wouldn't, if you didn't care before of how you toured people around, I wouldn't care now. You've always, Lisa, respected professional boundaries, so you'll continue to respect professional boundaries.
Can I make a quick comment also? I do a lot of open houses, and I've had people who have had an agent, and for whatever reason we hit it off, and they've referred me to people. So you're always on. You're always on.
So look, don't make this more complicated than it is, right? Number one. Number two, if you're making it complicated, it's about you, it's not about them. Just remember that, right? Somebody left their house for a reason on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon to look at a house. The people that have had agents are the same people that generally did have agents. The people who are not going to have agents are not going to have agents. So the people A are represented, B are just touring around and are open for a conversation. And then there's C, those people that are not represented, that won't be represented, and they're just going to go on their own merry way. Mike, you're next.
Yeah, I was just curious about your thoughts on, I have sellers that I'll talk to at least once a week when I have a listing with them, talking about the reporting and everything. And now on the buy side, I've had a buyer that has been very casually looking for legit like 2 years at this point. He works on the weekends. He's a chef, so when the weekend hits, he gets really busy. And then going into this year, we had another conversation. I had him talk to his lender again and figure out where he's at, and ask him what his timeline looked like. Did he want to get into a house this year, and did it make sense to set up a call every week towards the weekend to figure out a plan of attack? Like, let's see what open houses we're planning on going to, if we need to get private showings set up that are off your work hours. And I asked him basically if that was okay to do once a week, so I'm not just not hearing from this guy for months at a time, and then I get a phone call that he wants to get into somewhere, and now I don't know where his financing is at. So I'm just wondering if that is kind of a fair play for all buyers. Like, let's set up a weekly call going into the weekend if your timeline is, the next 3 to 6 months, to figure out a plan of attack and see what's out there and what's off market.
Look, I think for everyone here, right, there's a couple things I want you to realize. Take the word fair out of it. So I don't believe in fair. There's nothing fair in the world. If you're a child in my house, you say the word fair, you're going to be penalized. There's nothing fair in the world. There's no equilibrium. The world just doesn't work that way. This is your business, Mike Rivers. So people need to work in the way that you work, right? So think about it. You go into a Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons, they have a process in the way that they work with you, right? You go into Louis Vuitton, you go into Chanel, you go into a Mercedes dealership, you go into a Porsche dealer. There's a process that they follow. If the process is right for the consumer, they will align around that brand and service or product. If it's not right, they're going to go find somebody else. I suggest everyone needs to understand, like, this rectangle, this is my box. If you want to work within the context of the box, great. If not, leave. It's like people going to an iPhone. Well, the iPhone doesn't have all this stuff the Android has, and the camera's better. Great, so go buy an Android. I don't want to pay a commission and everything else. And great, so go look on your own. It doesn't matter. We all have to prioritize the value of our time and service more than we do today. If you don't value it, then nobody else is. Do you want me to share a very good example of this, that in a recent interaction that I had? Would that be helpful to anybody? So there is a group here, right? Let's see. I don't know if Tree's here, Amy's in this area. So they might have heard of it, called Startup Westport. Startup Westport has 1,200 people in there, right? So we have a content studio and all these things that would be appealing to the people. So I spoke to one of the gentlemen. I ran into him in the supermarket. He'd come in once, and it was like an unsolicited coaching session where I thought I was just having a meet and greet. And he actually spent the 45 minutes we had, like, literally having like a full-blown conversation of how we could sell his business better. It's all right. Nice guy. I did it. Fine. So I was telling him about live streams and stuff like that. Okay, so Tree's here, so she knows what this is, right? And so I saw the guy in the supermarket, and I'm more interested in this as we have another business launching and I want to do more stuff in the community. And I was telling him about live streams. He's like, oh, this would be great. The library would love it. I said, let me be very clear with you. I have a 0% interest in spending 10 seconds of my life or time into giving a bunch of information for free to benefit a bunch of people that I don't know. So another entity gets credit for it. I'm not going to do it. What I will do is if there's a mutually aligned interest that can help these parties, that they know that this is a service we offer and that we can get business for it, and it somehow benefits my goals, then I'm in. If not, don't even so much ask me a question. I'm not doing it. And the guy just looked at me like this, and then he smiled and he said, this is the difference between you and everyone else. You're very clear as to what the line is and where your path is. Not doing it. Because see, what you don't realize is, Mike, is all these little times that you give over the course of a year adds up to a ton of opportunity, time, and cost. So if these people are going to pelt you for your fees, your time, and everything else, then you need to protect the house. Does that make sense? And I don't think there's anything wrong with drawing a line. This is your time in your life and you have responsibilities. So if the guy turned around and he even said to me, well, that's not right. Is that how you are? I'm like, I run a business. I don't run a non-for-profit. I didn't ask to volunteer somewhere. If I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to go help veterans or underprivileged children. That's where I'm going to give my time. If I want to volunteer and give away a bunch of stuff, I might as well do it here and then help a bunch of people that actually really need it. Or I'd rather spend the time with all of you. So I hope that gives you all a little bit more confidence and understanding how this is. Chad worked and still does work at Equinox, right? Imagine you went to Equinox and you tried to negotiate all this stuff and go back and forth with them. And, well, I'd really like to come here for a week and try the gym. And they'll make a decision. They'll say bye. What would they say, Chad? Yeah. Who is the next question? Let's keep going. So the first two people ran to market. I find it very hard to believe that nobody has a question.
I have a question.
Okay, good. Who's that? Diane.
Diane. Okay, now the majority of everyone in this room probably knows the answer to this or think they do. So I'm asking you specifically. I have a listing. I have a buyer that comes to my open house. My buyer is not represented. My buyer wants to give me an offer. I want it, without going into who, what, when, and where, what is the listing agent supposed to do with that and what form is supposed to be completed?
That you'll have to talk to your, what state are you in?
New York, Long Island.
So New York is an agency state. I have my local agency expert here, Mike. You guys all know Mike from the Revenue Roadmap. Say hi to Mike.
What's up,
Hi,
guys?
Mike.
How are ya?
I'm sorry I'm throwing you off, but I think.
No, he's not throwing us off. Mike
Question.
can tell you more than most lawyers can about agency.
Spit your question out again for me.
I have a listing. I'm
Mhm.
running an open house. Buyers are coming in, not represented, looky-loos, decide they fall in love with the house. They want to give me the offer. They want to work directly with the listing agent.
Okay.
What do I do? Do I have to give them a buyer broker agency through someone through my office? Do I do a designated designation?
I mean, you obviously have to provide disclosure at the time, regardless of relationship, et cetera. And then if you want to make them your client, the best way to form that client relationship is through a compensation agreement. So you'll need to go to whoever your sales manager is and just
Okay.
say, what document are we using right now to consummate buyer compensation? Okay. Because that is the most necessary component at this stage. Here's what everyone is getting blown out of the water with is this requirement for agreement is not to represent. I can still represent someone as a customer. I just can't get paid without actually having now an agreement. So that compensation document that you're going to be utilizing with a buyer, which likely is going to look just like a buyer agency exclusive. That's probably what your office will develop for it, is what would be necessary in order for them to be able to pay you directly and submit that offer.
Okay, so I have to have this set up almost immediately because all of us that are doing open houses, this could happen this
Well,
weekend.
this is not, well, here's the thing. This is, you
So
don't-
right now, I know it doesn't take effect till July, but
Yeah,
by the
don't
time
worry
we
about
close, it'll be July.
No, but
It doesn't, no, no, no.
the offer,
Yeah,
too.
you can still, listen,
Yeah, you don't
in
have
New
to do
York
it.
State, well, I can speak to this as selling real estate, right? In the burbs of New York. I'm a Westchester guy. Look, you have to decide, right? You can 100% say, I only represent the seller, right? And provide them that disclosure. And what do you want to offer? $1 million, 20% down. Great. Like that's fine. Right. It's not, there's a difference between facilitating what somebody wants and offering somebody professional advice. A big difference. Right. So if Mike is unrepresentative and he's like, I don't want to represent myself. Great, Mike. What do you want to offer? Here are my 4 questions. How much money do you want to offer? What's your down payment? When do you want to close by? And do you have any contingencies? Right? Please provide me that information. Have I created any kind of agency relationship with you? None. It's a very basic blanket thing. But now if you start down the track, well, let's discuss what you want to offer. Do you want to go through the comps? And here, let me help you write that together. I won't write anything. Like my seller wants to, I would confirm with my client, right? Mr. Water Bottle. And I would say, hey, here's the situation. You know, Mike came here. He's unrepresented, right? He wants to make an offer, but as we agreed, you hired a broker, so I represented solely your interest. So in this case, we're going to have to collect some information from the buyer. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask them these 6 questions and put it in an email and they could respond and then we could discuss their offer. Right? And that's it. Right? Purchase price, down payment, contingencies, a copy of a pre-approval, right? Any kind of terms that they want to offer. Well, what type of terms? That's for you to decide.
However, I've always been trained that your Department of State has to be signed prior to you doing any of this. So I would have to provide them with a Department of State form telling them I'm working for the seller.
I'm back. Department of State only requires a disclosure to be provided when that actual fiduciary line is crossed. So for me having a conversation with you as a human being, I have to provide 0 disclosure in all 50 states. All 50 states. The minute that conversation, though, begins to talk about something in which a fiduciary duty or disclosure would be required,
Such as
financials around what's your ability to pay, what do you want to pay, here are some other attributes about this house that you need to consider, things that might involve their personal self-interests.
think about this, right? Like a science experiment, observation. There's 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. In inference, this room might not be the right size for you and everything. So as soon as you make an inference based on an observation, there is some form of agency created.
Yeah.
So Mike comes in and he says he wants to buy the house from me, right? I would say, great, Mike, I have to send, before we have a single conversation about this, I'm sending you over a disclosure form to have that you need to sign that makes it very clear that the only party I represent in the transaction, and if I were doing this, just, you know, the CYA thing, like cover your, you know, CYB, cover your butt, would be this. Dear Mike, I have attached a New York State agency disclosure form. Please read it carefully before you sign. And if you'd like, please, what is it? You have a right for an attorney to review. I would like to be 100% clear that the only person I represent in the transaction and have a fiduciary responsibility to, in bold letters, is the seller. So I will not be providing you any professional advice, guidance, direction on price, offer, terms. And I just write that all out there.
But
Like,
here are my 6 questions that you need to answer once you sign it.
no,
The questions from a facilitation standpoint are not considered functions of fiduciary advisement. So when you look at that, consider it as there is a function and responsibility that you have to your client to collect information. I could send you a blank term sheet, right? That says, hey, can you please fill in the terms that you would like? Because it's a part of me facilitating on behalf
you know
of the
what I
person I
would
do
do?
represent.
You know what I would do if I were all of you here? Here's how, like, the
Good
LF.
idea.
I would just make a Google form that, and so look, part of this is they're saying like, well, I treat you one way, you treat him another way. It's not fair, right? So I would just make a Google form and that says, if you want to make an offer, please fill out these items and attach your pre-approval, right? And it says, please advise, and I would work with your sales manager or your legal department and just get a nice disclaimer in there that says, you are not represented, and like, it kind of reads in the Riot Act, and then choose to represent yourself. Please provide this information and the seller will obtain your offer.
Yeah.
And then anyone that's not represented is filling out the same form with the same information.
And you're consistent.
And it's consistent. Bingo.
The reason
Okay.
everybody's been told, guys, so frequently that you should have that disclosure signed before you open your mouth is because we never know what direction a conversation is going to go. So
Correct.
even if we plan to have a conversation that's going to be very transactional, if all of a sudden they start asking questions about comps and comparables or, you know, financing, something that would require me now to make disclosure, I have to like stop the conversation and be like, here's a form. So it's customarily.
I personally would rather do it right up front.
But yeah, exactly. But here's the other thing. Most people don't understand how agency works, and they can't control themselves in conversations. So when people start talking, you know, they say the roadway to hell, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
With good intentions, right? So you have to understand how this is all going to work, right? And so the most recent lawsuit was an attorney by the last name Wang. And this is why these things have gotten so out of control. This guy is saying that he refuses to be part of the class action lawsuit, but sued a bunch of different brokerages, saying that he missed out on thousands of dollars of savings because the agents didn't want to sell to an unrepresented buyer. If I'm selling my home, do you know how many risks there are to selling to somebody that has no idea what they're doing? They don't know how to write an offer. They don't know how to negotiate. There are tons of emotions, inspection, appraisals, contingency, commitment letters, clear to closes, mortgage timelines, like all of this different stuff. This is my house and my asset. The last time I checked, no one else is going to pay my mortgage besides me. So yeah, I wouldn't want to sell to somebody. And for all of you, and Jody, you have to email me back about what is this materials list, or we could go through it here towards the end of the call, is look, you need to be very clear in being able to also communicate to your clients what a buyer's agent does in exchange for the compensation they receive. And then they could choose.
Can I add something to that? I know
Yes,
somebody
and I gotta
else
get to
wants to
Amy's
jump
question.
in.
That's the question.
Whose question? Amy. 1 second, Amy. All right, finish your last point, Diane.
The last point was that it was discussed in our staff meeting that we would assign someone else from our office to actually represent the
Yeah,
buyer.
dual
and we pay them-
agent, designated buyer's agent, if they want it.
No, but as a buyer broker, if they wanted it.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the whole way you always did it. It's not changed.
Well, it's not a buyer broker, but it's different. It is different.
It is a dual agents because they work at the same brokerage, right? It is a designated buyer's agent because this person's designated to represent the buyer's interest. So
Right.
you can't share any material information that would breach your fiduciary responsibility. Wow, this is bringing me back to like my MLS board code of ethics. This is why it pays to be in a coaching program, and people that actually like Mike and I and Wendy and Chris and Kate and the rest of our team who actually actively have sold or sell real estate. If not, this conversation is going into like Netherland, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I
it's
understand.
not going to make sense. All right, Amy, your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that was kind of my question. I mean, I assume, Diane, that on your listing agreement, your seller is paying a buyer agent fee.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you want to represent the buyer if he's asking you to represent him?
Because I'm representing him, not the buyer. I'm paying buyer agency to the buyer broker, but I can't be a buyer broker and a seller broker together.
Listen, in the end of the day,
But isn't that what we just said, Chirag, that she can be dual agent? Like, why has that changed? We do it all the time.
You
You
can be a
represent
dual
the buyer
agent.
and the seller.
but that's if the seller wants you to be a dual agent, right? Like if you're selling my house,
Right, right.
if you're selling my
Right.
house, the chances of you being a dual agent are a whopping 0, Amy. There's
Okay.
none. Because here's what happens in dual agency, they provide an offer. So what do you think about the offer? I don't know. What do you want to counter? That is the extent of professional advice you could give in dual agency. That's not what anyone
And then
pays.
she's designated.
Then you need to get
But I mean, it
another-
happens frequently. It happens frequently, Chirag. that you represent. That a
Right.
buyer comes in, they want to be represented, and you may do a designated agency with another agent in the office.
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
those are the smoothest deals.
If it's designated with another agent on your team or the office, that person, if you read the disclosure, has some form of fiduciary responsibility to that person. The other party has it.
Mhm.
There's a big difference between
Yep.
dual designated and dual agents. And then you have Florida, which is a transactional state. So essentially you represent the transaction, right? So it's different everywhere you go. But look, we all need to nerd out on real estate and understand how this works. Right. And the good news is we have many, 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 many days, 111 to be exact, but who's counting until this actually happens?
So true.
I mean,
111.
can I just ask another question?
Yeah.
So assume the seller says, no, I don't want you to represent this buyer. And this buyer says, I absolutely positively want to be unrepresented. So there's a floating buyer agent fee that's not getting paid. We've been told in our sales meetings that you then need to negotiate almost like an a la carte menu with the buyer, with the seller and the buyer as to who's going to do the home inspection, who's going to open the door, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, you know, and that we need to be offering these variable rate scenarios on top of a straight commission schedule, which just sounds so fraught with difficulties. I can't imagine that playing out. Have you heard of that? That's what Mary's saying we need to be doing.
I don't listen. Everyone is preparing the best that they can for this, right? So you don't know close to the date what the final thing is, and look,
Yeah.
If I can just say this as someone who's not actively practicing real estate, who's a business person. The chances of me doing all the work on the other side and not collecting money is zero. Zero, right? So the seller, where it gets really complicated is this. And this is, again, why government can lack like real world oversight into like how this all works. When an agent comes, they can use a lockbox, they can use different forms of letting in, but there's a security that a homeowner has when a professional licensee is in their home with another person. Homeowners, they don't know the buyer from like Tom, Dick, and Harry. They're not going to just let the person in there with a home inspector. Like the license has assumed that like you fill out a license, you get a background check and everything else. I'm not letting some stranger in person in my house. There was in Westchester, I remember this when I started, there was a woman that went around. Her name was Shelby. How this lady's not in jail, I don't know. But she would go and write bounce checks and move into houses and all of this weird stuff, representing herself, convincing people to let her in. If there's squatter rights and the house is vacant in your state, do not let anyone in that house that's not represented. They could never leave. Right? So there's a lot of this to be able to unpack and understand. But the more you talk about these scenarios, the more you can go back to your seller clients and say, how do you suggest dealing with these scenarios during your financial transaction if there is no other agent? And if you want me to do the work of the other agent, here's the compensation you'd have to pay me, but more importantly, here are the things you're going to lose in representation because I can't do them anymore. Cherish Hope, nice to see you. So this is what I suggest going forward. It's 12 o'clock, it's 12:02. You should be writing every single one of these scenarios down. Like seriously. It is the smartest thing you can do. Like we sent out a sheet that says, what are your biggest questions around this? 23 people answered. That's bad. That limits our ability to help you. The more you share, the more we can meet you where you are. In the listing state, the seller will not work with unreal. Okay. I don't know the legal advice, so let me give you a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. This is not professional advice. This is not legal advice. This is merely an opinion. If I own my house and that is my choice, well, that should be my choice. I don't personally consider it a form of railroading, steering. If my house is $1 million or even $500,000, what world is that not a lot of money? I want to make sure that if I take my home off the market, that I'm A, going to maximize my equity, and B, that my house is going to get to close it. Look, you see this nice commercial office space that we're in and that many of you have visited? Guess what? I use the broker. So I don't know how to do a commercial deal. None of my life depended on it. They could hide 1 or 2 words. The leases are like this. I would not have got to the finish line without my broker. It's been a nightmare. I know how many conversations we had even with his guidance and how confusing this is. So stay focused. Just keep showing up. One more question, Angelo. The open house scenario with the 6 questions you asked that are very objective, and are you then supposed to? No, they need to write the offer. I'm not doing anything for them. You're not paying me money. I'm not working for you. Think of yourself as
Writing
lawyers.
the offer.
Think of yourself as lawyers. You think lawyers are doing work for free? You maybe get a free consultation. The second they have to write an email, a court appearance, or anything else, you're getting paid. You need to get paid. That's why I suggest going to a Google form.
Hmm.
Yep. And if you'd like to standardize your practice of a Google form on that's how everyone submits offers, so you don't have to go through a bazillion emails, that might be something you want to do. What's different in contract states now, I do know they're my California friends here, and other areas we have to write the purchase and sales contract, and it's going to be a little bit different. But in those states, they need an agent even more. Those contracts are complicated. I remember my brother bought a property in Florida and the woman was explaining the whole thing to me. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I went back home to my attorney state. Like, Chad, we have this attorney states, right? I went back and I said, thank God for these attorney states, right? Like writing this whole contract and going through, it's exhausting. You should be paid double the commission. All right, everybody, on that note, with love in my heart, I love you all. Let's just keep moving forward. This was a good call today. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chirag.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.